because that's part of culture. What happens in politics does play into what happens in our daily lives to a certain degree. And of course, it's reported on the news. So you say stuff about it. But Johnny Carson was exactly right there. And Jay Leno was really good at that, too, to be candid. In fact, he was excellent at not making it a political show. And these guys had so much success in that day and age and made that genre great and big, because they never made it a political show. Stephen Colbert has a crappy show that's no fun to watch. I mean, he had during the COVID-19 thing, he had dancing syringes on. I mean, come on, that's so stupid and obviously political. His show's going away. There's no doubt the demographics changing in terms of where people watch things these days, but the downfall of his show is entirely due to the rancid political nature of his content. That's just not interesting to more than half the country. I mean, it's not even interesting to all people that agree with him, because they need an escape too. So no, the numbers are going down because of that. It's sad because it's a great genre. I mean, I used to watch Johnny Carson at night, when I was old enough to do it, by the way, at night all the time. And it was thoroughly enjoyable. And you had all the most important people around talking about things. Now, one last thing. One of the things that Democrats have been successful at doing is grabbing entertainers and shaming them into believing that they should be political. It took a long time to get there. Bill Clinton helped get over a major hump and hurdle in that regard, because he was, to people on the left, so cool, and to many entertainers. And entertainers in this country largely stayed away from it. They all have a vote, so vote, but really they don't know anything about politics or policy. All they know, the very rare cases, all they know is how to read lines, memorize lines, and to deliver them in the right way. That's what an entertainer does. And that's where they should keep it all at. And the rest of us just, want them to stop this. I hope that this thing with Colbert is the beginning of a change in the entertainment industry, which we're seeing to some degree already, at least on the margins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Let's see what Elvis Presley had to say about this, Logan, about the whole politics thing. Here we go. Here's EP.
I've never been out of this country except in the service,
Oh, Mr. Presley, on the subject of the service, what is your opinion of war protesters, and would you today refuse to be drafted?
Honey, I just seem to keep my own personal views about that to myself, because I'm just an entertainer, and I'd rather not say.
Do you think other entertainers should keep their views to themselves too?
No, I can't even say that.
I'm just an entertainer. Yep.
He understood his audience. Mm-hmm. There was nobody in this country that ever thought about politics with Elvis Presley, and everybody loved him.
Yep. They did think about patriotism, because Elvis was very patriotic. He went off to the military. He did his service. He allowed himself to be used as his image to boost the military. And then he came home and he did a lot of patriotic stuff. He supported the police. He was a huge collector of badges. If you come here to the Mid-South, particularly maybe you want to come here during our national conference coming up this fall, take a tour of Graceland. He had a huge collection of badges. And of course, he wanted to get a badge, I think of the DEA from President Nixon. And that's a huge picture. One of the most sold pictures ever is that of Elvis Presley and Richard Nixon. He wanted that badge. He performed patriotic numbers in his concert, particularly his trilogy. So he didn't want to be political, but he was patriotic.
Well, one of the key aspects in his day of both the military and first responders, both police and fire department, is there was no politics, at least directly, in either of those. Obviously, the military goes out and does political things. One of the most important and really sad things that the Democrat Party has been successful at doing is to politicize the police and first responders. They're going after ICE to try to destroy them. This is a Democrat thing. This is not a Republican thing, not a conservative thing. There's a real effort to destroy this country that Democrats are doing. They're not an American party, but Elvis was able to provide that support for those people, and it still should happen. But he was able to do that because we didn't politicize those things. It wasn't a political thing to support the military. It wasn't political to support the police. Now the police are pariahs in the eyes of Democrats. Even other first responders are. But thankfully, you do have things like the Tunnel to Towers Foundation and some others that are really doing a lot of good work to support the harm that happens when you undertake those jobs. So we're getting some sense of that back in a certain way, and hopefully we can restore it. But it was a key aspect of America's freedom and liberty that we protected ourselves both domestically and around the world in a relatively neutral fashion, notwithstanding getting into the argument of, the military industrial complex. I mean, there were some problems, but they weren't nearly as bad as they've been in recent decades.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So CBS cancels Colbert. Logan, don't show my screen, but let me just share a little bit with you. This is what I put in tonight's Worldview report. Leo Holman and I, who put that together every night, if I can find it real quick. Let's see. Here we go. All right. So broadcast TV has fallen to less than 20% of TV. Broadcast TV has now fallen to less than 20% of TV. And that's according to the latest Nielsen surveys. So, there's some of my friends that bought terrestrial radio stations many, many decades ago. And I was just telling Logan again, I said, aren't I glad I don't own terrestrial radio stations? I'm not sure some of these guys could sell these stations for what they paid for them, because how many people do you know are listening to terrestrial radio, right? That doesn't mean I don't appreciate the terrestrial radio stations I'm on. I do. But it is a station, it is a technology that's been diluted by the apps, even Sirius, on your car, where you don't get commercials. The on demand, it's a different day. It's a different day. Jim?
Yeah, they've made an attempt to utilize the phone by having various services like TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and those apps, and they're working hard to keep that sort of a relevance. I cut my teeth in media on radio myself. I was 4 years, I had a daily radio show, on KLZ in Denver, Colorado. I know that KLZ has constantly struggled, and they make some money, but that may be a dying medium. And that medium lasted longer than it would have otherwise because of Rush Limbaugh. Let's just be honest. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was the rising tide that lifted all boats in that area because he was such a mainstay. But that is going, with his passing and other changes that were already beginning to occur anyway, that is going away. But the television broadcast realm, they are on both cable systems and on the wire cutting services like a DirecTV or some of those. If they had good content, people would go get it. It is a diluted content because there's so many offerings. I have a wire cutting service, and I don't even consume everything that's on there. I have it mostly for the news programs that I need to track and keep up with. I just was telling Myra last night, maybe I just want to get rid of it. I can just get clips elsewhere. There is a real change happening around this. But again, if you have something that people want to watch and that they're interested in, they'll go find it. Radio needs to figure out a different way, as it's working to do so, to be able to sustain themselves long term, because people are consuming a lot of video content. They don't consume as much audio content as they used to, except for maybe podcasts. But there's a real change happening. Excuse me. And the leftist manner of most of these stations is killing them as well. You do see people try to gravitate to conservative stuff, but even in the conservative realm, there are some changes. We don't know what the fallout's going to be 10, 20, 30 years from now, but it is going to be a much different landscape than what you see now, both on the entertainment side and on the news and information side.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go to the Epstein files. Is President Trump being a little vindicated here now on this topic?
I think he's being hugely vindicated. But the reason he's being vindicated is not so much that everything is being put out there and suddenly the hatchet's buried. People are still concerned about what's in the Epstein files. But two major things have changed this paradigm big. The first one is that the Wall Street Journal just slit its throat. Their story is objectively false that they were going to put out on Donald Trump, stating that he had this raunchy, rancid letter that was part of some book that Ghislaine Maxwell put together for Jeffrey Epstein's birthday. By the way, even if it were real, I don't think Donald Trump would have been harmed from it. He made it through that sexual innuendo tape in 2016 when he was running and became president. I think people have come to expect the fact that Donald Trump's younger life was filled with those sorts of dalliances. Nobody believes, except the most radical leftist, if they do, that he ever did anything illegal in that regard. But his life was very loose. I hated it when I was a young Christian watching him do that. I had respect for him as a businessman, but I had no respect for his personal life. That seems to have radically changed. The Epstein thing, I think we know now that Donald Trump's frustration with the Epstein thing and the negotiation he was making with his base when he said, I don't need you. And that was a negotiation, folks. He still loves you all, but he thinks you're stupid because he knew something more than you knew. And that was, this stuff's going to get twisted. When he figured out that he was going to have his reputation twisted by just being on the file, then he started to realize that, well, maybe a whole lot of this is just going to harm people, and they really didn't do anything wrong just because they associated with him, as so many people did. That does not mean there's not important stuff that we need to find out with Epstein, but we got a good sense that with Donald Trump's exoneration, and I see it as an exoneration, that he was that there could be real harm done. The second thing is Pam Bondi is apparently today, I haven't seen it yet, I've been busy with some stuff, going to be releasing grand jury information on Epstein. That doesn't do everything, but it does do something, and it is a response. And that's really positive. But when you take a look at the failure of the Wall Street Journal, the failure of the canceling of the Stephen Colbert show, and then just yesterday, or actually it'll be finalized today, the House is going to defund NPR and PBS. The media is at a breaking point. Everything that we have thought that they had power to do is breaking apart. It happened in the election last year, and now they're beating these dead horses, and it's going nowhere. One of the greatest positives that has happened in our country is that Elon Musk bought X, because it broke the system that had been developed during the Biden administration to literally shut out conservative voices from being able to communicate anywhere in media, social media, anywhere independently in a planned and organized way. That has been largely destroyed. It could pop back up and cause harm in the future, but right now it is destroyed. And the American people are not accepting these radical media types. And I think we may be watching the death knell of two major areas of crazy media. One is the radical leftist mainstream media, represented by PBS, NPR, and the Stephen Colbert show. And it goes deeper than that. It's not just the Stephen Colbert show. Their numbers are going down big time. The other side is the Trump derangement syndrome side, represented by Murdoch, who owns Wall Street Journal. Wall Street Journal was once one of the best newspapers ever created in the West, certainly maybe even by mankind. I went to, speaking of Tennessee there, I went to the Webb School in Bell Buckle, Tennessee, an elite private high school. I was fortunate enough to go there. Vermont Royster, the former editor-in-chief of the Wall Street Journal, he's the guy who, for the most part, really made that paper what it was. He was a graduate of my school. And it was a fantastic paper, both on the news side and the editorial side. And of course, they always had great stock market information when you couldn't get it online. That was the paper to go to. And it was a great paper. Murdoch has destroyed it, and this may be the one thing that really does do it, because this story is outrageous and false, and it's intended to destroy Donald Trump from a Trump derangement syndrome way of thinking, and it's going to fail again. And you may someday find something truly, really bad about Donald Trump. I have yet to find it, and it really surprises me as well that I haven't. You would figure all the stuff he's done, it would be there. The guy is almost squeaky clean. I know of no politician hardly that's that way. I know of no public people in general who are that way. Donald Trump's been that way. He's just brash in his approach. I'm glad to be a Donald Trump supporter, and I think that this will be a net positive for the country because it's going to strengthen him moving forward. So we really will.
So we can get back to
kill things.
To get back to MAGA is what we need to do, right?
Yeah.
All right, here is Caroline Leavitt at the White House the other day. Here we go.
These are not honest news organizations. These are partisan, left-wing outlets that are funded by the taxpayers. And this administration does not believe it's a good use of the taxpayers' time and money. The NPR, unfortunately, has become really just a propaganda voice for the left. Just a few examples for you. In 2020, NPR refused to cover the Hunter Biden laptop scandal in the run-up to the election. They said their assertions don't amount to much, writing they did not want to waste the listeners' and readers' time on stories that are just pure distractions. That does not sound like an unbiased opinion. That sounds like a partisan opinion to me. And this is a taxpayer-funded organization. In 2018, that same CEO that you're talking about called the president in the Oval Office, who nearly 80 million Americans elected, she called him racist, shared a photo of herself wearing a Biden for President campaign hat, serves on the board of a Soros-funded activist group. In 2020, PBS's White House correspondent at the time characterized President Trump's speech then at Mount Rushmore as a love letter to white resentment, promoting the myth of America. In 2017, PBS devoted an entire panel talking about what it means to be woke and white privilege. These are not honest news organizations. These are partisan, left-wing outlets that are funded by the taxpayers. And this administration does not believe it's a good use of the taxpayers' time and money.
And I agree 100%.
Well, it's a whole lot more than that. It's not only a waste of taxpayer money, it's not authorized in the Constitution.
That's right.
There's zero authorization for funding news organizations. To be candid, and this gets into the third rail of politics, if you really are a strict constitutionalist, every one of the programs that FDR and LBJ created, social programs, none of them are authorized in the Constitution.
100%.
If we got rid of federal Medicaid today, it would that service would not go away. The states would pick it up. They already have the organization set up. You would have less money coming in the federal government, and they would be able to pick it up and do with it as best serves their citizens in each state. And it would be a far more efficient, better program. Some states would do poorly, many would do well. And the states are authorized to do such things. The federal government is not. PBS should never have been funded to begin with. It was an early attempt at providing alternatives to media that certain politicians didn't like. That's why it all started to begin with. It should never have happened. And I'm glad we're finally able to put the death knell in this, unless Republicans are stupid enough to bring it back in a future budget. Because remember, these rescissions are short-term things. They apply to the current present budget. If they extend this funding into the next budget, then I think everyone should be up in arms. As I say, Republicans are the weak link in the Trump agenda.
Well, here's a good headline. Trump administration officially defunds California's high-speed rail. Well, good. Why should we be paying for that, right?
Yeah, the rail to nowhere. I mean, this was never going anywhere. It's a boondoggle. It's about paying back contractors that give money back to Democrat politicians. That's literally what this has been, as a slush fund for people to move money over to Democrat political efforts.
And by the way, Jesse Ventura built this kind of, built some kind of thing up there in Minnesota. And my friends in Minnesota say that no one will, anyone with a right mind rides it. It's so crime infested. Nobody in their right mind would ride the thing.
If you have poor, and part of it is because they have as poor policing as New York City has had right now. That I was on the New York City subway, I don't know, about 7 years ago. Seemed incredibly safe, no problem. The city was a pleasure to go to. It's not that way right now. Minneapolis is a horrible place because they've destroyed the policing. These things are prone to violence and theft and problems unless you have good policing around it. And we've totally destroyed any sense of that in so many ways around this country, and that's why that's bad. But again, public transportation, by and large, there might be a few exceptions, but public transportation is typically a waste of money. They put it out for the purpose of saying, well, poorer people need transportation, particularly in inner cities. Okay, if you can make that argument, and you let it be done privately so that it can happen. The better approach is not to spend boondoggle money for these things, but to get government out of these people's lives so that they can enrich themselves rather than enriching people aligned with politicians.
Yep. All right, look at this headline. How much time I got left, Logan? Brazil police raid home of Bolsonaro accused of plotting a coup. This is just garbage. By the way, I've interviewed his son in person a few times and via technology. And this is just ridiculous. I mean, the man also, by the way, was stabbed. Let's not forget he was stabbed as he was opposing the Marxist ideology that runs in the Supreme Court over there. And they let the communist leader out of prison. They let him out of prison, the communist leader, Lula. They let him out of prison and said, you'll be our puppet and we'll let you out of prison and we'll rig the election. I think that's exactly what they did.
Listen, I'm deep into this. Eduardo Bolsonaro is a friend of mine. Paulo Figueiredo and Alan dos Santos, two exiled journalists who Alexandre de Moraes, the Supreme Court justice there, is trying to throw in jail as well. If they were ever to go back, they would be. Alan dos Santos is one of my closest friends personally in the world. I know many of about a dozen members of the Congress of Deputies down there are friends of mine. I communicate with them all the time. This is a serious issue. This is all had its origins in much of the major problems like Chavez and Venezuela and many other things. Lula da Silva, the current president, who's a criminal, who was taken out of prison to defeat Bolsonaro in a rigged election, a truly rigged election. He and Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez all started the Sao Paulo Forum in 1990. It was an effort after the Berlin Wall fell and the fall of the Soviet Union to try to implement communist socialist ideology into Latin American countries in North and South America. And they had a lot of success for a lot of years, but Lula is a communist. He's out there lying, saying that Donald Trump would be in prison if he were in Brazil. That's what that's kind of how he's doubling down on this right now. I feel really sad because I'm acquainted with Jair Bolsonaro. He's a great man, and he is truly a patriot for his country. He's going through what Donald Trump has gone through in a little bit worse fashion, evidenced by what just happened today. So we need to pray for Brazil because Brazil is 2/3 the population of the United States. It's not an insignificant country, but I know a lot of people in that country, and that country wants Jair Bolsonaro to be president.
Yep. Jim Papp, theconservativecaucus.org. Have a great weekend, Jim.
Thanks, you too.
Jim Papp checking in. Worldview Tube's Washington Report, brought to you each and every day here. Brought to you in part by you through our foundation. As we push out free programming to anyone who wants to understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview, and Jim does. We talk about that a lot, don't we here? Worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. So thank you for your support to keep the broadcast and the network going. Worldviewfoundation.com. Take care. Tonight on the Worldview Report, support among Republicans has grown for a discharge petition introduced by Representative Thomas Massey of Kentucky. And that would force the House to vote on directing the Department of Justice to release more files related to pedophile billionaire Jeffrey Epstein. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, after a call from President Trump, said his government deeply regrets hitting a Catholic church in Gaza, killing 3 and injuring 10. The Israeli Air Force intervenes on behalf of Syrian Druze, that's a religious minority in Syria, as Israel bombs government-aligned Islamic jihadists threatening to wipe out the Druze. Another conspiracy theory has been proven true, and it involves state governments using natural disasters to condemn and purchase land cheaply for their own development projects. And an iconic American company on the verge of bankruptcy just a few years ago is making a comeback with plans to blanket the country with new nuclear power plants. All these stories and more as the Worldview Report begins right now.
This is Worldview Report with host Brandon House. Whether it is news from the nation's capital or your state capital, from the classroom to the boardroom, from national security to national and local news,